r/AskReddit. NSFW. Redditors who lived in secluded towns. What's the darkest thing that has ever happened in your town that everyone knew about but never talked about? In my hometown there was a girl who hid her pregnancy from everyone. She gave birth in her family home while everyone was out, but hemorrhaged and fainted. Her dad found her and took her to hospital where they proceeded to ask him where the baby was. He didn't know she was pregnant, but went back to the house to find the baby. He found the baby in a bucket in the cupboard. She had stabbed it multiple times with manicure scissors. She claimed it was dead on delivery, but the autopsy proved otherwise. She was arrested and spent a few months in a mental institution before being released back to my hometown. This is the most disturbing one I've read yet. I'm just wondering how TF you hide an entire pregnancy from your parents. Edit. Okay guys, I get it, she was fat. Leave the poor girl alone. Edit. The poor girl was meant to be /s. Thought it was obvious. Somebody owned a pub and killed his wife and bricked her into the wall. She was reported missing. 30 years later they were renovating the pub and found her, but at that point her husband had died. Edit. I've left a link to the article I found. Thank you for the silver. That's some Edgar Allan poet. Again. Hope that happened in the better order. About 9 years ago, a guy lost his job at a nearby Kaiser, so he killed his 5 children and wife and then turned the gun on himself. Before he shot himself he faxed a letter to a news station explaining that the tough economic times we were living in left him no other choice, and also apparently indicated that he and his wife had agreed to this murder-suicide pact weeks before it happened. They had pulled their older children out of school and everything. Holy cow, that's horrible. Why they would kill the kids too. That is just the worst parenting ever. People who do this kind of thing inflate their importance to the kids to the point they think the kids will never have a good life without them. And it'd be better to kill them. One guy in the 70s or 80s killed his whole family. He didn't kill himself, but he was planning on running and decided his family would never survive without him. So he killed them first, then took off. He got away with it for 20 or 30 something years. His name was John List. A girl at my high school went missing. Then about 2 months later the paper ran a story about how a local girl was abducted, taken to Mexico and gang ape sodomized, and several other graphic details. That girl showed up at school. She was there about 5 minutes before everyone connected the dots, and she had to leave. It was sad as it at the time. It's even sadder now that I'm grown up and understand what happened. My small town paper is an asshole. Wait, so the victim was basically exiled? The duck. Yeah. Some people are real assholes. I can't imagine what they would get out of taunting and ridiculing someone who has been a victim of something like that. But they do. Girl in my neighborhood was tied to a tree, ate by multiple boys, and left there overnight. Completely naked until one of the neighbors found her in the morning. No one talked about it. Nothing was ever done. What the duck? That poor girl. Does she still live there? Now they untied her. Edit. Thanks for the gold everyone. I live in a small town in the middle of a few small farms. One of the farms has a sort of greenhouse flower shop. One of the owner's sons committed suicide in the greenhouse. Later that year the father went into a field just outside of town and shot himself. His body was found by some kids going to school. Nobody talked about it. Edit. Wow, I never expected this to get this much attention. I'm actually from Canada in a very small town. Only about 700-800 people. It's the kind of town where everyone knows everything about everyone, even without people really talking about it outside of their own homes. Hence how I found out. The screenshot of Belle Plaine is interesting because I live near a town called Belle Plaine, but I'm not the same one. It's crazy how many similar stories there are. If you'd like any other information I'd be happy to answer. That sounds a lot like what happened in my town. A popular bar was closed down by the county over Super Bowl weekend, and it ruined the business's financial year. Apparently the owner was already having problems and he hanged himself in the bar. It was closed down for a couple of years, but eventually reopened under a different name. And now everyone just seems to pretend it never happened. Fun fact, the past tense of hanging as a form of death is hanged, never hung. Merry Christmas. I used to live in remote Australia. A body of a girl about 17, 18 turned up in the middle of nowhere. I mean nowhere. The nearest house was 40 km away. The road was red dirt. Some drovers found her nearly decomposed. No one knows who she is. No one knows where she came from. The only theory they have is that a river flooded and brought her down from Darwin, and she's more than likely an international tourist. We don't talk about it because there is literally no town and no one in it to talk about it to. Also, remote Australia had a guy go missing a few years ago. Got a new lead a few years later, so SEs went out doing an emu walk. Found a skull case closed. Except nope. Not the same guy. Now I need to know what an emu walk is. I hope it involves actually emus. One of the elementary school teachers was molesting kids. He went on a Wednesday night in March hunting trip with a bunch of the kids' dads. There was a terrible accident, and the teacher did not survive. The mandatory sheriff's investigation found no sign of foul play. Weird name for a hunting trip. I think it refers to the fact that there would be no reason to go hunting at that time. No open seasons, and in the middle of the week, when most people are working. They took him into the woods for the sole purpose of killing him. Copied from a previous post I replied to. Most depressing story time ever. One of the biggest and most notorious cases to hit my county was when 2 teenage girls were hit and killed by a driver who fled the scene. This post reminded me of this story because one of the girls had parts of the driver's license plate imprinted on the backs of her thighs. That's how hard she was hit. The driver was drunk. Went home after the crash. Asked her son to hide the vehicle, but first he needed to crash it into a pole to create some damage to cover up the hit and run damage. The kicker? The girl who had the license plate partially imprinted on her thighs was the daughter of the drunk driver. The driver hit her 14-year-old daughter and her best friend and left them to die in the streets. I don't think she knew who the girls were when she hit and ran. But damn. She got 8 years. Also, I live in weed country in NorCal, and we have a lot of locals and non-locals who flock to our remote and rural hills to trim weed on the black market. We have an epidemic of missing and murdered women, including indigenous women, and most of those murders simply go unsolved. It's pretty terrifying. Edit. Wow. I posted this at 3 AM last night and just came back to see the response. My inbox. Thanks for silver. Kind stranger. She got 8 years. Only 8 years. The guy that killed my granddad in a hit and run got 3 years. Was let out after 18 months. Definitely the inbreeding. It was going on well into the 80s until they put the highway in. I'm not originally from the area, but all the locals like to pretend it didn't happen. It's still visible as many locals are short and have small hands/feet and very similar facial features. All of them look related and most are. I got one of those history books for the town, and in it, pretty much every documented marriage was between half siblings or first cousins. Edit. No one has yet guessed correctly. I responded to someone last night that the general area is Tennessee. What I have learned from your comments/guesses is that the United States has no shortage of inbred towns. Love that the highway seems to have sorted it out. Oh duck. I thought that put the highway in was some sort of weird expression that I didn't understand. Maybe something along the lines of putting the foot down. English isn't my first language. I read your comment and realized that op literally meant putting a highway in to prevent the town's family tree from looking like a family donut. My dad getting arrested for child abuse was the giant scandal. Pretty much everyone was supportive for the most part, which I don't hear a lot of for small towns. Landlord went easy on my brother for rent until he got situated. People would periodically bring food to check on us, and it never felt like gossip. Reckon. I had a friend who relocated. Her dad was arrested for multiple counts of ape. Also a small town. But after the rest of the family relocated, we haven't spoken. I hope they are okay. Username checks out. 2 terrible things occurred. A very popular boy hung himself from a swing set in a town park. He was 17. At that time there had been a couple suicides of young boys in our area, but this one really took people by surprise. Funeral was terrible. He had one older brother and a sister. About 3 or 4 years later, the older brother hung himself at the same place on the anniversary of his brother's suicide. Terrible. My friend's 21 years old sister was murdered in her house on Christmas. Came home from celebrating with family to find someone robbing her house. He beat and murdered her with a baseball bat. Ended up to be a kid she went to HS with. He ended up killing himself in jail. It's been 10 years and it's still difficult to talk about. I'm not 100%, as I don't recall the first event. But I'm pretty sure I went to the same HS as the second story people. That was very sad. I love it when Redditors come together. But not like this. Recently divorced father went to ex-wife's house, killed her and her new boyfriend, then shot himself. All in front of his kids. Also, another guy kidnapped a girl, killed her, aped her dead body, then chopped her up and dumped the remains. Edit, this is two separate people. Dude, you need to move. It's cool. He's dead now. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together.